Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to video 2 of lesson 1.2 on adding integers. In our first video, adding integers, we learned same sign, add, and keep. Well, in this one, we're going to learn something different to help make it simpler, just like we did. Now, I know you already went to the book. You went to the top, bottom of page 10, and you probably wrote this down word for word. It said subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater absolute value. Then use the sign of the integer with the greater absolute value. Now, if you try to memorize that, wow, that is confusing to me. And if you remember again in video 1, and I talked about when it had absolute value in there, I said, hey, let's understand that we're doing absolute value, but we're not actually going to spend time doing it. We're just going to understand what it is, and we're going to move on. So in this one, I'm making it simpler by saying, hey, different signs subtract, and then give the answer the sign of the bigger number. So different signs subtract, keep the sign of the bigger number in your answer. Okay? So here we have 8 plus a negative 10. If I were to use what the book said, we would then spend time taking the absolute value, and we would get 8 for the absolute value of 8, and we get 10. And then we'd take the greater absolute value, 10. We'd subtract the lesser absolute value, 8, and we'd get 2. And then we come over here, and the greater absolute value is 10. And the sign of that 10 is negative, so we'd come over here and we'd get a negative 2. That is a lot for me to remember. That's confusing. So now we're not going to think absolute value anymore. We are just going to, different signs subtract. I'm going to go and I'm going to subtract just the way I was taught in elementary. I've got 8, I've got 10. I'm not looking at the signs. I'm not looking at anything. I'm just going to look at the numbers. And I'm going to say 10 minus 8 is 2. Keep the sign of the bigger number. 10 is bigger, it's negative, so the answer is negative 2. Bingo. Modeling that, if I had some chips, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positives, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 negatives. When you think about modeling this, adding them is combining, putting together, and I have all of these 0 pairs. A positive and a negative 1 single out to 0. So that is all 0. And what's left? All I have left is these negative 2 marks. I have negative 2 left. So a positive 8 and a negative 10 combining, because that's what adding is, gives me negative 2 left because of the 0 pairs that cancel each other out. On a number line, we would be starting here at 8, right here at 8, and we know that when we add, we go to the right. We're always going to the right when we add, except when we look at this 8 plus, then it says negative 10. That negative sign always reverses direction on a number line. A negative reverses direction. So instead of going to the right, I'm reversing direction and going to the left 10. And where do I end up? That's right, negative 2. Right there, this is adding a negative 10 if I do it on a number line, just like that. So if there's anything here that you want to write down, then you need to pause the video and do that now. Moving on. Negative 18 plus 23. We're adding. We always look at the operation first. The signs are different, negative, positive. And so different signs subtract. I'm going to take 23. I'm going to subtract 18, and I'm going to get 5. Well, the 23 is bigger, keeping the sign of the bigger number. The answer is 5. I could put that on the number line if I wanted. If you want it on the number line, then in class, when you come to class, say, Mr. Ross, I want to see you put that on the number line and model that for me. Otherwise, we're going to move on. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we got some more notes to take. You may or may not have already taken them. If not, pause the video, go to the bottom of page 10 and take your notes on additive inverse. If you've already taken them, here we go. Additive inverse says, hey, the sum of an integer and its additive inverse, and an additive inverse, another word for that, and I should have put parentheses around here, is opposites. They're opposites. The sum of an integer and its additive inverse or opposite is 0. The sum of an integer and its additive inverse or opposite is 0. In other words, if I have a positive 8 and a negative 8 and I add them together, that equals 0. 8 and 8 is 0. I can do that by modeling it, because I can put a negative 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I can put a positive 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we get all these 0 pairs, and all we have left is 0. Doesn't matter if it's a number or a variable. I can have these unknown variables. We're going to be talking about those later. X and a negative x. X represents the same value. The answer is going to be 0 when they are additive inverse. Additive inverse, when we add and or subtract, you're going to learn about that when we're doing and solving equations. But additive inverse, when you put those two numbers together, they are opposites. They make 0. It just happened to be there in the notes, so that's why we threw it in there. All right, so let's go back to adding our integers with different signs. Same signs we add and keep, different signs we subtract. So find 2 plus a negative 11. Use the number line if you need to check your answer. 2 plus a negative 11. I'm adding. The signs are positive and negative. They're different, so I'm going to subtract. 11 minus 2 is 9. The 11's bigger. The answer is negative 9. Done. Use the number line if you need to. Write that down and then join me here for example number 6. Negative 9 plus 10. I'm adding. The signs are different, so I'm going to subtract. Different signs subtract. 10 minus 9 is 1. The 10 is bigger, so the answer is positive. Because 10 is positive, I'm done with that. Copy it down and join me on the next one. Remember, looking, listening, and learning. Stopping the video every time I go to the next example so that you can write that down. Here we go. Negative 20 plus 15. No more opportunity to model anymore because that's where we're going. No modeling. No number lines, no chips, no nothing. No plus and negatives. Here we go. Negative 20 and positive 15. I'm adding. The signs are opposite, so I'm going to subtract. 20 minus 15 is 5. The 20 is bigger, so the answer is negative 5. Bingo. Done. Copy it down. See you at the next example. Number 8. Negative 126 and a positive 382. This time, I'm adding. And my signs are opposite. So what am I going to do? Yay! I'm going to subtract. 382 minus 126. Anybody who happen to know what that is? 382 minus 126 is, whoa, let me figure that out real fast, 256. Of course, the 382 is bigger, and so the answer is positive. Sorry, it took me a second to get that done in my head. I was doing it in my head. I'm not really big into doing the algebraic stuff, you know, the algorithm stuff. If you could, you need to, you do. You know, you could have borrowed from the 8. I already did all that in my head. That's why it was taking me a second to get the answer. Moving right along, adding more than 2 integers. We're going to find the final account balance after the transactions. So deposit, and withdraw. Deposit is adding, so these numbers are positive. These are positive. So I want to find my final account balance. I have 35 plus 40 plus a negative 25. I'm adding them all together to find my account balance. Well, the easiest thing to do is, for me, is to look for the same signs. These two are positive, so positive says add and keep. 35 and 40 is 75. Plus a negative 25. Now I'm going to subtract. 75 minus 25 is 50. 75 is positive, so the answer is 50 bucks. I have a positive 50 bucks. I'm still good. I'm not in the red. I don't owe my account anything. Because if you go negative in your account, the bank gets very unhappy with you. That's always a good thing to be positive. Doing it one more time, finding 8 plus a negative 13 plus a negative 28 plus 35. Well, wow, we have an awful lot of add-ins here. Some are positive, some are negative. So again, I'm going to find like signs, because that's what I like to do. 35 and 8 is 43, plus, well, I have a negative 28 and a negative 13. And when I add those together, I get negative 41. So now I have opposite signs. I'm going to subtract. 43 minus 41 is 2. And since the 43 is bigger and it's positive, my answer is 2 when I add all those together. That's what I like to do. Find the same signs, add and keep, and then I find the different signs and I subtract. Keeping the sign of the bigger number. That's the end of this video, ladies and gentlemen. How outstanding is that? You do have 2 things to do on quick write number 2, writing a complete sentence and then adding these 2 integers with opposite signs. Please remember to write down any questions that you have, or you can put a question mark in your notes, or you can highlight a section of your notes. Some way to say, hey, this is what I need to ask Mr. Ross about in class. When we revisit those notes, a very, very, very essential part of our learning, revisiting notes. It's not going to work if you haven't taken the notes. Revisiting notes you haven't taken does not work. You've got to get your notes done. You want, go ahead and start a couple problems on your assignment, but please remember, once 45 minutes is up, you're done. You don't need to do any of your assignment, but you can. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.